Hey everyone, how's it going? My name is Olian and we're going to synthesize an electric bass today. This is a pretty cool exercise in order to just create some of your own bass sounds, but also understand sound design and synthesis in general and frequencies and all this kind of stuff. So we're going to jump right in and I'm going to tell you what the approach is here. So I recorded this little bass sample here, which we're going to be listening to and looking at, and then we're going to try to recreate it in Silent 1, but you can use any synthesizer really that you have or that you want to use because it's a rather simple approach. So first of all, we're going to be looking at the frequency content of the bass sample which we have, and we're going to be using Voxengo Span for that. Voxengo Span is a spectrum analyzer and it has like a high resolution mode, so it can give you a pretty detailed overview of the frequencies of the sounds you're checking out. So yeah, I'm going to play this sample real quick and we can take a look at what's in there. So now here you see the frequencies. One of the cool things in Span is that you can hit hold and then you can take a detailed look at what's in there. So let's do that. Pressing hold, here we go. And now we can take a look at the sample. So I was playing in E. The E bass is, electric bass is playing in E. And if we take a look now, we can see these different frequencies in here. Even though we're just playing one note, we obviously contain a bunch of different frequencies. And what we can tell from the beginning is that the frequencies range from around 40 hertz to around 1 kilohertz or 1000 hertz. Then you can also see that they're all different in amplitude and that you have some resonances over here. Like a resonance is basically like a bit of a peak where you have some amplified sections. If we take a closer look at what frequencies exactly are contained, we can see that we have something around 41.5 hertz, which we're just going to call 40 hertz to make things easier, which is in E. Up here you can see the note which the frequency is. So here we have something around 40 hertz, which is in E. Then we have a louder note at around 80 hertz, which is also in E. Then we have a slightly quieter note at around 120 hertz, which is a B. Then we have another E at 160 or 166 hertz now. Then we have 200 hertz more or less, 247, and so on. So we can check this out, but what you're going to notice is that these are all multiples of the fundamental frequency. So the fundamental frequency always doubles. You have 40 hertz, plus 40 is 80, plus 40 is 120, plus 40 is 160. Since we have 41.5 in the beginning, obviously we don't go to those exact values, but if you just add those up, you always get the next frequency in here. You call these things harmonics, and in this case all harmonics are contained, or like even like the frequency structure is like filled of even harmonics, which means that you double the base, the fundamental frequency whenever you jump to the next frequency. So this is important to know because now when we start to synthesize the sound, we can pick a waveform which has a similar frequency structure. So we're going to jump into Silent 1 and initialize the patch to just start from scratch. And we're going to be picking a sawtooth wave because a sawtooth wave contains exactly all harmonics of the fundamental note which you're playing. So let me demonstrate that to you. We're also going to open Voxengo Span over here, but for silent, I'm kind of holding silent down here in order for you to see everything. And I'm going to bring the volume right down. Now I'm going to press a key in order to play silent. Okay, this is a sawtooth wave. We're playing in E at 40 hertz. We can hold it. And now we see that it has the same structure, 41.5, 83.2, just as we have in here, more or less, okay? Because this is playing in E, this is playing in E, this is playing a B, this is playing in E, and we have the same structure of E, B, E, B, E, and so on. So this is the basic waveform which we can use in order to get closer to this. We're going to change the waveform later in order to get a bit more accurate, but for now this is like the basic approach which you can use to understand, okay, what frequencies are contained within a certain sound. And in this case we can say, okay, we can do something similar with a sawtooth wave. Now we can obviously see the difference that here we have a lot of high frequencies, and here the frequencies get quieter and quieter, and then after 1K there's nothing left. So we can kind of replicate that by using a filter, because a filter will cut off the frequencies at a certain point which you set, and every subtractive synthesizer has a filter in there. So we're going to pick a low pass filter, which means we're going to let the low frequencies through and cut out the high frequencies. And we want to have or get rid of the frequencies after 1K and start like getting quieter at around 200 Hertz. So let me unhold this here, and we take a look how we can set the filter. The high frequencies are already gone, but we can bring it even lower. And now we see, okay, we cut off the stuff at 1K. If we hold this now, we're somewhat closer to what we had here. Let me actually turn the volume up a bit, or actually let's give it some drive, which is automatically going to add a bit of distortion. Maybe slightly less. Hold it. Okay, here we go. So we're somewhat closer, but the next thing we see is that the 40 Hertz is quieter, while here the 40 Hertz is the loudest thing, and then you get a bit louder around 80 Hertz and this kind of stuff, and then you have some ripples. But overall, we can tell that the loudest part is like between 80 and 200 Hertz. So one step we can do, which is like a little boost at the cutoff frequency, is the resonance, because right now we probably set a cutoff around here. So if we add some resonance, maybe we can see a little boost happening. So now this is giving us a boost at around 400 Hertz. And that's not necessarily what we want. We technically want a boost around here, around 200. But now using this, all the other frequencies below 1K disappear. But maybe if we change the filter type, which means we can change how quickly the filter cuts out the frequencies per octave. If we change the filter type to 12 dB, maybe those frequencies come back, and we can now actually set this filter a bit lower. And now we get our boost more or less in the area where we wanted it. Now our resonance is here. Okay. So this was already like the beginning of an approach which you can use in order to try to get a bit closer to creating an electric bass. But obviously we have all these ripples here, and this is not really what we wanted. So it's always also a bit of trial and error, and that's what I wanted to show. Something you can realize now, or which you know by experience, is that different pulse width or different pulse waves contain different kinds of frequencies and have some ripples in them. If you ever looked at a pulse wave while doing pulse width modulation and checking it out in the spectrogram, you will know what I'm talking about. So we can check out these different pulse waves to see if it maybe resembles a bit more, back to 1K, if it maybe resembles a bit more what we're looking for. So let's give it maybe a normal pulse wave. Holding this, now we realize there's this huge gap in here. I'm going to show you in a second. Let's get rid of silence for a second and bring Voxengo span back. Here we go. Now we can see there's this gap in here. And so a pulse wave doesn't actually contain the frequencies which we need, because it only has odd harmonics and not even ones. So We're starting at 40, we're skipping 80, and we're going straight to 120. Then we're skipping 160 and going straight to 200. So it's basically always leaving out every other harmonic. So it's not really what we need. But let's take a look at maybe a pulse wave with a different width, like a half pulse. Now we can already see, okay, now there's some stuff going on. And the fundamental is slightly quieter than the next harmonic, and then you have some ripples in there, but it still doesn't quite resemble what we were looking for. Let's take a quarter pulse to see what kind of frequencies are contained in here. Now we're getting even closer. If we take a look now and maybe... So here we go. Now we're getting a bit closer. We can see somehow that there are some ripples in here, and they're more or less something somewhat similar to what we have here. Obviously there are still differences, but it doesn't seem that bad at this point. So obviously something, a wave with a high or with a small pulse is kind of what we're looking for. So since Silent doesn't have this, but other synthesizer have it, you can technically create any pulse width that you want if you can do pulse width modulation. In Silent you can set that up as well by using two sawtooth waves and inverting one of them and shifting the phase by 180 degree, which is going to create a pulse wave now. And now changing the phase of the inverted or the not inverted sawtooth wave is going to give us different pulse width. I already did a video on this a while back, so check out pulse width modulation on my channel. You're probably going to find something for that. But now let's keep going and see. I'm going to bring Silent down here so I can change the phase, and we want to create something more or less like this. Let's bring the phase up to create a smaller pulse. I actually have to put a wave to put one voice, because otherwise we don't hear anything. We don't get anything from this guy. So now we're around a quarter pulse. Let's bring it up more. Yes. It goes even slightly higher. Okay, then this starts disappearing, so we have to bring it back here. So we want the boost at around 546 Hertz. 546 would be here. So more or less, okay, that's something. We can keep it like that. And now we have, let's put this on hold as well. Now we still have some differences because this fundamental is much quieter than this one. Then you have these different boosts here. And depending on what synthesizer you have, there might be some options to do this. But for Silent, we ran out of options how we can fine tune this to get closer to this, at least for the best of my knowledge. Maybe some detuning and some phasing and stuff might help. But for Silent, that's it for this point. But what we can do to try to get closer is just throw on an EQ. Obviously, the EQ is going to be pretty static, but we could record. So if we EQ something for one note, it's not going to stay the same once we play different notes. But we could sample the sound that you create and then pitch it play it at different voices, you know, at different pitches. So this is basically just, I'm just going to go over this real quick. We can then see, okay, we want to bring the low end down a bit. So we can do like something like that, for example, and take a look. Here we go. We're bringing down the low end to a point. Actually, I have to put the EQ in front of span, obviously, to see the changes. Here we go. Then we have a little dip at around 124. So we're going to take number 2, band number 2, go to 124, bring up the Q Okay, even a bit less, more Q. Here we go. Now this is already slightly closer to something like that. Then we need a little dip at 205, which I can do over here, 205, and a lot of Q to just affect this band and bring it down. A bit less here, bringing the gain up. I changed the frequency nut again. We wanted this at 205. Here we go. And then hold it. So this seems more or less similar. Then we have this, we are much lower over here. So we're going to do a little dip at 331 with band number 4. So we could go on with this for quite a while, maybe boost it a bit over here, then also boost it around 1K. Just going to do this real quick. Okay, we said number 5, we go to 1K, give it a good old boost. And then boosting it a bit around, what do we have here? Boosting it a bit around 541 with number 6. 541 up. So now you could play this forever until you get even closer, but we can see that we created something similar, which looks similar visually to the bass sound. Now we can obviously, we don't want to just look the same, we want to make it sound similar. So let's listen to the bass sample. The basic idea is similar, of course. But there's still two differences. First of all, the bass feels a bit snappy because you like pull the string and you have a bit of attack in there. And we can do that by just giving it a bit of decay and bringing the sustain down a bit, which is going to make it, which is going to shape the envelope of the sound. Instead of now coming like feeling like it's pushing in, it's kind of coming in a bit like this. So what I'm doing is I'm bringing down the sustain and giving it some decay time. And then since we now brought down the sustain, I'm giving it a bit more amplitude, some drive and some volume. So that's already a decent bass sound. Now, one of the other differences is obviously there's more high end and a bit more high end in the electric bass, especially in the beginning there's more high end and then it disappears. This is the sample. We're giving a bit of release so it doesn't click. Like it comes down. So what we can do is we can modulate the cutoff and say, hey, we want to start with a bit more high frequencies and then end up with the low ones. So we can do that by just forming an envelope where you have a bit of decay and a bit of release and then just add some modulation. Now we get a little snap in the beginning. Maybe bring the cutoff down slightly. maybe not completely that much. Now we added even a bit more snap with the whole filter modulation, so we can actually take away some of the initial snap that we added by raising the sustain a bit. Okay, that's something cool. Obviously it sounds different and it sounds a bit detuned in this kind of stuff, but maybe we can reach that by just adding a bit of detuning. And we're obviously it's too much of the filter. So obviously the electric bass sounds pretty different, and I mean it sounds acoustic. You have like this fizzle on top, and we're not going to be able to recreate that. But like this, we already have a sound which sounds like a cool bass, which we can use in productions, and which is a synth bass in the end. I mean, if you want exactly an electric bass, you should use an electric bass or a sampler for an electric bass. But just to understand sound and be able to recreate stuff and then make your own sounds, I think it was a useful thing to kind of look at this stuff. If you have any questions, let me know. I'm gonna make more videos about synthesis, so feel free to stick around and subscribe, or if you have any requests for sounds or things, feel free to let me know. And if you have any feedback for how I'm doing, obviously also let me know, because I want to get better at this and share more interesting stuff and make my videos better as well. So if you have any comments, feel free to leave them below. I hope you enjoyed yourself as much as I did, and I hope to see you next time. Peace.